Hi everyone, welcome. We're now ready to begin today's webinar, Diversity Climate, a Key to Managing Diversity in Organizations. I'm Virginia with Rutgers Executive and Professional Education, and I'll be your host and moderator. Rutgers Executive and Professional Education is the proud sponsor for today's webinar, and we're very excited to include this topic into our webinar series. We encourage everybody to send us your questions throughout the presentation. You will do so by using the questions box that you see pictured here, and you'll press send at any time. We're going to have a question and answer at the question and answer session at the end of the webinar where we will address your questions. The webinar is being recorded, and a link to the archive version will be sent to you via email by the end of this week. It's now my pleasure to introduce our instructor. Dr. Patrick McKay is a professor of human resource management at Rutgers School of Management and Labor Relations. Patrick's primary research interests are the interactive effects of race, ethnicity, and organizations' diversity climates on recruitment outcomes, employee job performance, work attitudes and retention, as well as organizational level performance. Patrick, please take it away.
Here to talk about diversity and how to manage it, in particular in terms of diversity climate. This is in response to an in general increase in diversity in terms of race, ethnicity, gender. You have 4 generations in the workplace right now, so we must grapple with how to manage it well. And despite the popular press on diversity being a benefit to companies, you tend to see it have a mixed array of effects. Some are positive, some increases in performance, some effects are negative, and some are null or non-existent. So the question is why? And that leads to my emphasis on diversity management in terms of a concept we call diversity climate. And as you see on your slide here, it has effects on these various outcomes, employee outcomes, business outcomes, as well as reducing subgroup differences, say race, ethnicity, and gender on various outcomes at work. So why do we need to focus on human resource management system for diversity management, where their main concern is social identity or social identification? Members of different groups have different statuses in our society. For example, you have racial ethnic minorities and women having lower status than non-minorities and men respectively, which leads to differential outcomes at work. Whether whether you're hired, the type of discretion you have, and these other outcomes you see here. And so the issue will be, how do we reduce these disparities and get the most out of all of our employees? Also, how can we get these folks from different groups to get along and work together for the common good of the organization? And so when you bring in differences, you also may bring in group out-group dynamics. People that are from underrepresented groups may be treated in a disparate way relative to their colleagues. Also, signaling is important because as an organization, we're trying to attract and manage diversity well. We need to send a signal that it's appreciated.
Back to what we were saying, we're on the 3 diversity perspectives, and the first one we talked about, discrimination and fairness. This is concerned with legal compliance. It's especially among government contractors who are concerned with maintaining business with government, and so do they hire requisite amount of diversity to maintain those contracts. Access and legitimacy is concerned with, does the employee or the labor force mirror the diversity within the customer segment? And to agree that does, that's positive for business, but also it may lead to workers being isolated in tracks that don't necessarily lead to advancement. And then finally, integration and learning is integrating diversity into how business is conducted, and it's targeted toward improving how organizations function. And so our presentation today will primarily focus on integration and learning in terms of actually incorporating diversity into how the business runs, thereby leading to the improvements that we can gain from managing diversity effectively. Okay, let's see here. Thank you. We're all set. Now we'll focus on diversity climate as the key topic today in response to the diversity approach and how that affects performance. Diversity climate is concerned with perceptions, from employees that their employer uses fair human resource practices and socially integrates all employees into the work setting. And these, as you see on the slide below there are several benefits of supportive diversity climates: better attitudes, improved performance, enhanced retention, and better service performance. Okay, so here's an example of the effects of having a supportive diversity climate on store unit sales change for a chain of retail stores. You notice when you have high diversity climate perception among managers and the subordinates, you have 10% or 10.2% sales growth, which equates to roughly $44.6 million increase in revenue. And so when both managers and subordinates agree that diversity is of importance, businesses perform better. Here we see diversity climate effects on how many products employee or how much sales per hour employees earn in a retail setting as well. We find that when diversity climate scores are high, both sets of employees, blacks and whites, sell more products. And this equates roughly to nearly a $21,000 gain in sales per employee per 20-hour per week schedule. Similar results when you contrast Hispanics and whites. You see higher performance in terms of sales per hour when the diversity climate score is high. And so here you have this equates to roughly $27,000 increased sales per employee for a 20-hour sales week per year. So now the big question you might be asking yourself is, how do we get this kind of climate? There are supportive diversity climate, 3 ways to do it. The first is you must have top management buy-in. They must proclaim that this is going to be something of value to the company. They must commit resources to doing so, and then also make the managers under them accountable for diversity outcomes. And we'll talk more about that later. Data collection and interpretation. The company must know their climate before pursuing diversity as an initiative. If the climate is toxic, diversity won't be maintained in the organization long term. And then also, does the human resource system reinforce a supportive diversity climate? Do they conduct business in a way that will maintain and reward having a diverse workforce? So here's a system for driving a supportive diversity climate. It depends on whether you seek out diversity. Do you embrace it once it's there? Do you enable it to affect how workers perform? And do you affirm it in terms of rewards that you pay to personnel? And we'll talk about each of these in turn now. Recruitment. Do we recruit in ways that will attract diversity? You must recruit in a way, you may want to target underrepresented groups, say minorities or women, depending on industry. So you go to sources where those applicants will be present, and you present your job ads and those sorts of things to the individuals that you're targeting. Do you send signs and signals that diversity is valued? Do you have representation in key positions? And do you espouse equal employment opportunity and other practices that are friendly toward diversity? In selection, you must ensure that you're not screening out members of underrepresented groups, minorities, women, older adults, and other folks that you might be targeting. And so you want to use methods that are not going to do that. For example, cognitivity tests tend to screen out minorities, and so you might want to supplement that with less negative, impacting procedures such as structured interviews and things like that. And then you want to score and make these decisions in terms of promotions and selecting applicants by using diverse panels and doing so in a way that ensures that everyone has a fair chance to potentially be hired if they're qualified. Socialization. And so here we're talking diversity embracing HR practice. Do we send the message to incoming employees that diversity is of value here? And so are leaders socializing their new employees to know that diversity is important? And so do they have can they have testimonials from employees that show that they're in fact a good place to work for a diverse workforce? Does the leader endorse it? Those sorts of things. And so send a message early that diversity is of value. Do you also train employees to be competent in managing diversity and working with diverse others? So are they trained on unconscious biases? Do we offer career ladders for these underrepresented groups to show them how to succeed? Do they have supportive networks and so on to help them succeed in the organization? And also, are managers accountable for making sure that all employees have developmental opportunities? Diversity enabling HR practices are concerned with allowing diversity to flourish in the organization and affect how work is performed. So, and these are some of the rewards of doing so. You increase productivity, job satisfaction, and other positive outcomes. Here you're concerned with, say, a working single mother. Are we willing to allow flex time arrangements or flexible work schedules to allow her to work and also care for her, for children that she might have outside of work? And so are we willing to enable different lifestyles to be able to work and also contribute to the organization and not be rigid about our policies? Employee involvement, do we involve all employees in making decisions? Do we give people discretion to make decisions, to have voice at work, irrespective of their group membership? And also, is the environment psychologically safe to do so? So can you make suggestions that are outside the box and not be ridiculed for doing so? And so those kind of environments will allow diversity and the ideas and new perspectives that come with that to positively affect work performance and organizational functioning. Okay, diversity affirming HR practices finally. Here, are we rewarding people fairly and equally in terms of their work performance? So are we using behavior-based criteria to rate employees? Also, we might think about broadening the types of criteria we use on the job. Can we, team building, things that affirm and reinforce diversity should also be valued in an organization that says it's important to how they function. So we want to think beyond just core task performance, but also team building, development, mentoring, other types of things that could build the workforce and make it effective. And these other ones, somewhat obvious: sanction discriminatory behavior, train raters in terms of what signifies effective performance and make sure they're on the same page, make managers accountable for the ratings they receive, make them justify them, and that should lead to better fairness. And then use diverse panels so we can get rid of the subgroup biases and intergroup factors we talked about earlier. And then finally, compensation. Are we paying fairly based upon the factors that underlie the job? Are we compensating on the knowledge requirements, things like that are important? Are we paying based upon performance? Are managers accountable for the pay decisions they make? Can they justify it via performance? And then also, to ensure fairness in the wage disbursements, are we using diverse panels to make those decisions to ensure that we're not shortchanging members of disparaged and underrepresented groups? Okay, finally, the full agenda for managing diversity effectively includes the 3 buckets we talked about earlier. Managers have to endorse it. It has to be top-down endorsement of diversity as something of value, and that the company is going to pursue and commit resources to doing so. Secondly, before even pursuing a diversity initiative, make sure your climate's ready for it. If the climate is toxic to diversity or antagonistic, you won't retain those workers. A good example, I can think of a tire company that had routinely does minority hiring blitzes to keep their federal contracts to sell truck tires to the U.S. military, but yet they have 200% turnover rates. And so you want to conduct surveys to see what the climate is, as well as talk to particular groups of employee segments to see if there are unique issues that they're facing at work. And then finally, build an HR infrastructure that supports diversity. So do you have practices that allow you to attract diversity? Do you have, do you recruit from broad sources that are going to tap various segments of the applicant population? Do you select diversity in terms of using selection tools that aren't going to disparage certain groups relative to others? A good example, are you using physical ability tests and public service domains that might screen out women? Good example, like among firefighters. And then are you retaining it? Are you rewarding and utilizing that diversity to allow workers to make their full contribution at work and feel valued and affirmed in the organization? Okay, now I'll turn it over to Jenny. That's all I have here, and she'll take it from here.
Okay, thank you so much, Patrick, for this great presentation, and thank you everybody for your patience with our technical difficulties and our lag. I think even with those technicalities, this was a really great presentation, and I do appreciate it, Patrick. So now what we're going to do is we're going to open our question and answer section up. And if we don't get to everybody's questions due to timing, don't worry, because I can send your questions to Patrick and I can email you with his response. Okay, so our first question is for Patrick. What advice do you have for managers who promote diversity programs but may face resistance to their efforts by their colleagues?
Great question. Simple answer to that is one of the nice things about diversity climate is that you don't see backlash effects. Because if you think about it conceptually, what diversity climate is about, it's really about fairness and affirming everyone at work, making them feel valued. So to the extent that you maintain a pro-diversity climate, support diversity climate, everyone will feel valued. So you don't tend to see backlash effects. At least that's what the research shows, that you don't tend to see that. And then also, it may call for training. It may call for training to make sure people understand what promoting diversity climate is about. It's not an affirmative action program. It's about making sure everyone feels included and involved in how work is performed.
Okay, great. Our next question is, how can colleagues work together to change or influence the perspective on diversity?
Again, I largely attribute that as a function of organizational management. Management has to set the tone that diversity is going to be valued. So initially, I don't even think that's an employee issue. I think it's really the management's job to set that tone and make that a priority, and then manage accordingly. So so that employees fall in line with the program, and so. But also, too, it may just take simple education about what a diversity climate initiative is all about. So are we, in fact, making sure that diversity is something that's going to be emphasized? So I think it's management's job first, and then it's employees to kind of educate one another about what it means and how it can contribute to organizational performance.
Okay, great. Thank you.